I'm dead in the reality that I was in. I had shifted into a parallel reality. Bullets were whizzing by me like in the Matrix. My consciousness chose to come here to keep on going. People are experiencing a multiverse that is real. When shifting into another reality, you can use quantum jumping. It's an energetic shift into another timeline. There's a quantum higher self that knows about all the lives. And I've been able to access, communicate, and interact with these versions of myself. We're going through an amazing shift. We're becoming aware of everyone else's thoughts, feelings, memories. The Akashic's becoming alive. We are in an age of misinformation in which people are actively utilizing this understanding of reality creation against us. You have to be able to monitor how you give energy to these pendulums. These pendulums become living entities. They are referred back in magical texts as egregores. Now, this is a game changer in understanding how realities are shifting. I had this sort of home invasion happening a while back, and somebody shot at me, and the bullet bounced off my back. And since that moment in time, when it happened, it felt like time sort of froze. And I was in this space where I could see all these different futures available for me. One where I'm bleeding out, another where I'm shot in the leg. And from that space, it felt like, time had stood still. There were multiple people in the home invasion, so I got shot at multiple times, and I never was scared. There was no fear. Bullets were whizzing by me like in the Matrix. And then, after that happened, I had felt like I had been in this other place, and sort of where time was different. And from that point on, it felt like I had shifted into another reality. Yeah, I had, objects that appeared that weren't there, objects that disappeared. People contacted me I'd never met before. Movies that sequels for movies that I know for sure that I would definitely have watched as a big movie fan, or music, the albums that have come out that I would definitely know about that album. I was just in this, what seemed like some other reality, seeing new buildings that had, never been there. And so the sort of scientist in me just assumed I had experienced just some sort of trauma or post-traumatic stress from the event where I was shot at. And so I, went to the psychologist. They said, there's nothing wrong with you. And I tried to explore exactly what had happened. And, the more I started talking to some physicists, started really reading up on it, and became convinced that I had shifted into a parallel reality. And then, from my experience and what I had read before, I started to experiment on ways that I can continue to do that with a sort of knowledge that it's possible to shift it into another reality. And so it was definitely a near-death experience. I should be dead. The events around this, shouldn't be, when a bullet hits your back and it just bounces off.
What do you mean by bounces off? Like, I got my brain like.
Well, I mean,
what?
so I had like I was sitting in, it was during the Super Bowl, and the Broncos were playing the Panthers. And so I'm a big Bronco fan. So, and I think they checked the house, and they noticed I wasn't in my room. They thought I wasn't there. Right. I was just sitting, it's like 4 a.m, and I'm watching all the TV, catch up on my team. Right. And I hear a noise, and I look over, and I notice the porch door is open. And I'm like, I've been sitting here with my porch door open, and I have cats, like they probably ran outside. And am I really that just distracted? And I walk up to the door, and it was a double pane glass. So there's this person standing there with a gun, and they just, I immediately shut the door and turn, and I hear the gun go off. It was a 22. So that might be part of the reason. And I could hear the bullet during that time when everything froze. I could hear the bullet hit both panes of glass, and it shattered. And then it felt like a long time before the second window shattered. It was like, shh. And then I was like in this space where it was forever, where it was like till the second window. And then as I'm running, I feel something on my back, So the science of it is it probably got slowed down by the by the glass, and the fact that it wasn't a super strong gun. But I've read about it. A gun like that's pretty dangerous. Even if it
It
goes through
is.
glass, it
Yeah.
usually will just cause more damage. It's not going to blow right through. So I got super lucky, and I should have been dead. And every moment I've spent since then, I've been super grateful because I'm still alive. So it was like a wake up call for me, and like, how can I make a difference in the world? Because I looked back on what I had done, and it was like, you really didn't do anything.
Well, this
So.
is where it gets really trippy for me because when I'm speaking to yourself, I don't want to preface your answer with the response that I'm assuming you've given. And this is something I'm going to struggle with because I followed so much of your work for
Oh,
so
okay,
long.
okay, yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Like, do you think there is a reality where you potentially, and pardon me, this might ruffle some sensibilities, but a reality where you actually did get shot and didn't make it, and then you've stepped into this reality where you have made it? Like,
A
your
hundred
thoughts in and
percent.
around that? Whoa.
I,
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
I'm
Whoa.
dead
Okay.
in the reality that I was in.
Explain that to people because that's going to blow some minds, right? Like, yeah.
There's no way for me to prove that. You know what I'm saying? But and I've done, as you know, a number of episodes exploring the theory behind many worlds theory, and the way that parallel realities work.
The
And
multiverse.
prior to this event happening, I'm experimenting. I'm reading Cynthia Sue Larson and Burt Goldman, and I'm experimenting with parallel reality shifting already. I've already somewhat aware of it, and had experienced some things that were a little bit like, okay, that's a little odd. But I was still in the sort of mode where, yeah, it's probably just stuff I'm playing around
Healthy,
with. And
healthy skepticism mode. Yeah, yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
why not? I'll try it, but and so, but I'm somebody. I'm an experimenter. If somebody gives me a technique, I'm going to try it. I'm going to sit down and try it, and I'm going to see what happens because I really enjoy just exploring my consciousness, and I love different, breathing techniques and meditation techniques. And so I was in a place where I had basically lost everything, and I'm deeply in debt. I've lost, relationships ended. I'm not with my kids. It feels like I'm going to lose everything, and I don't have any way of changing it. I'm not going to get a sudden infusion of money. And so I was in a point where I was like, hey, I have to change my reality through consciousness. And I've read enough books and watched enough YouTube videos, and I know that this is possible, but I really haven't like sat down and made it my intention that I'm going to change because I don't have anything else. So I started really doing this, and so I was in a heightened space, and it started working for me. I got new job opportunities, new investment opportunities. I met the love of my life. Things are going great for me. And then that happened. So I felt like I had already sort of traversed the multiverse of what I knew about a little bit. And my consciousness was more open to the idea of it when it happened. But when this happened, and as I've explored it and really, pondered on it, pretty sure that I died in that reality. And that my consciousness chose to come here to keep on going. This reality is the same, yet a little bit different. And it's very much like when people talk about Mandela effect. I was experiencing a personal sort of Mandela effect. And hey, I was like, if I'm still alive, then and I have all this knowledge because I'm just an avid reader, and I'd been a hypnotist before, and I was like, maybe I can do something to help other people who have been through similar circumstances to transform their own lives.
It's interesting because your work is really informing so many different people on so many different metaphysical concepts, and yet
Yeah,
your background, when you start to feel into like where Brian's coming from, it seems to be quite grounded in many ways, and yet still has this deep mystical fascination, would you say?
absolutely. If you follow my channel and watch the episodes, it's as woo woo as you get. You know what I mean? But when people know when they listen to my stuff that I'm trying to ground it with some scientific consensus, with some reality. I'm trying to take all the perspectives of it. I'm not somebody that's going to openly tell you how it is. I'm going to tell you what my thoughts are on it, and I'm openly skeptical, and so the spiritual journey is the nature of it is that we really never truly know, and so that there's that sort of gray area that everybody has to go through, and it's really about experience. You can prove what's going on up to a certain point. You can see certain things in the physical universe, but then there's this point where everything else is going to be based on experience. It's going to be based on what is happening internally through consciousness, and there really is no way for me to prove to you what I've experienced. I can only give you my experience of it, share it with you, and say, hey, you can try it yourself. Why don't I create a meditation for you, and you can try it, and then you can share with me if you experience something similar. What I found so fascinating is that so many people have done my meditations and then come to me and then told me about these miracles happening, objects disappearing. I just was talking to somebody today that claimed that they had done a quantum jump for healthing and for health, and suddenly the prescription that they had to get, they wanted to get off this drug, just disappeared. That was in their car. They knew it was there. They're driving to the pharmacy and it just disappeared. And then slowly later on they were able to quit taking that prescription. And I know that thousands, not just a couple, thousands of people have reported similar and unusual circumstances. Now, obviously, some of those are memory. Some of those are people that they don't quite remember what's going on. But a number of those are certainly valid and authentic, and it's enough to where you have to say something's going on. People are experiencing a multiverse that is real, and that's what I'm trying to share. That's part of it,
Yeah, it's one of the things that blows my mind as I start to approach this is there a certain scale potentially at the level of choice that you're making that opens up opens up a different, because the theory in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we have certain choices, and certain choices based on the decisions we make, a different possibility opens up and different timelines open up based on those choices. But then also at some point I'm looking at a piece of toast kind of going butter, no butter, and I'm wondering, surely that mustn't be as important as it really is. Maybe it is the butterfly effect. I don't know. Your insights on that?
There is none that are less important than others, right? So you had made a point of it being important. Infinity is hard to fathom, but there is an infinite number of realities. Now, coming from a perspective, we've really done this a lot, and have been able to look out and see the different realities. I've been in a space where I can see streams of light, kind of like in Marvel. I love in Marvel when on Loki they show the multiverse as sort of a branch, a tree branch. I've been able to see it, and the truth is that most people, no matter what decisions, they're sort of locked into the same reality. Most people are, there are some decisions that we make that really do branch off. And yes, making a choice between butter or jelly on your toast is probably not going to make a difference to the reality. It could be very slight, but sometimes there is the butterfly effect and one tiny little choice. What I like to do is be able to sense into a timeline that already exists and to move into it. And so those choices and the decision points are not as critical. It's more the timeline that I want. I want a timeline where these things are occurring, and I can sense into it, and I can shift my consciousness into that timeline. Now, what was the cause of that timeline? And no, it could have been all the way back when I chose bread or when I chose butter over jelly with my toast. But at the same time, the actual cause of the timeline is not critical. The timeline has merged with a number of choice points. And I do think that we're actually constantly existing within a group of timelines, if that makes sense. And a lot of that is we're bound by what we have in our past, by our identity, by our culture, and that sort of locks us into a timeline. And then that timeline branches off. But yeah, every single decision we make, every breath we take is pretty much shifting us into a different reality. Most of them are similar.
Yeah. So in this particular point, I think it's worth highlighting following your work is you have a very different take on the law of attraction type sort of stuff, because The Secret has the law of attraction based in it, but I think that is kind of looking from this way, like looking from your centralized, localized space, looking outwards, trying to draw stuff in, and kind of like I can visualize it so I
Yeah.
can pull it in. But your worldview is somewhat like it's already out there. I'm trying
Yeah.
to draw myself into this other reality, correct?
I agree with everything that they teach in the law of attraction. It's just the major difference. I mean, law of attraction works. Everything they say is true. The only difference is you're not attracting something that's coming to you. You're choosing that something that already exists, and it's not really attraction. You're shifting into something that already exists. So it's just a concept. The concept, people think that when they're attracting that new car, that the car is magically coming from somewhere and coming into their life, but actually you're just moving into alignment with a reality in which that car will exist within your reality. So it's there's a difference, you may know, between the masculine and feminine perspective when it comes to law of attraction and reality creation. And the masculine perspective, the place I'm coming from, at least at the beginning of my channel, is really, how does this work? I need to know. I need to know. I need to know the specifics of it. And so the masculine is like, I need to know how the car works. I need to know where everything plugs in, and I need to know. So if I'm going to create my reality, I need to know. But the feminine perspective is just sort of from the heart, an acceptance. It doesn't matter. There, I don't need it. Is it a parallel reality? Is it something else? So I'm coming from that masculine perspective to begin with, to where I need to know. And so it doesn't necessarily help me. The fact that I know that it's a parallel reality, all that matters is what works. And so, and I can even say, people can say, following my channel over time, that I still talk about those parallel reality things, but I'm also focusing just as much on the intelligence of the heart, on the power of just being, on the power of emotions. I mean, Neville Goddard was teaching the feeling is the secret. And so, that's part of what's happening when you're shifting into these realities, is that you're seeking out signals that are based on feelings and things like that. It is complicated and simple at the same time. There's so much to it. And I'm always fascinated by any little bit of knowledge or information that I get from anyone. There's some great law of attraction teachers out there, and oftentimes they're very correct.
Hey there, guys. Hopefully you're loving this conversation. I'd just love to take a quick moment of your time to ask for a special favor and request. Please hit subscribe to the channel. The entire channel you're witnessing, you're participating in, you're a part of here is empowered by your subscription. It's you that powers this channel along. Please take a moment to hit subscribe. Thank you so much in advance. Back to the episode. You mentioned Neville Goddard, and we're gonna dive in deeper into into some of that stuff a little bit later, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
You mentioned the grey space earlier, and it's really interesting because I think you and I both share this fascination of, you mentioned that we can't, there's a certain point where you know, and then you can't really know. And I think the sort of one of the favorite places, which I find yourself in and myself, is the double slit experiment, right? Where it's like things are particulate or things are wave, and it's actually all down to the consciousness that's observing what's going on, that all of a sudden now things are like, it shows up like this, it shows up like that, and it's like, whoa, it all depends on the observer, and this starts to get really interesting. And so this opens up into something that I find is a place, even though you're through your masculine approach, I find we end up in this place where the universe isn't locally real. When I come across your work. Yeah. So can you explain that briefly for people that are tuning in, or not so briefly? Take your time. It's like,
well, within the quantum space, there's not one reality. There's infinite realities. You can, and for you to fathom it, you can treat it like an information space. A lot of times when I explain it like that, people understand it better. It's that within that wave space, when it's unobserved, within that infinite void of possibility, before it's being observed, then when you bounce the basketball, all the different possibilities of the way that ball is going to bounce exist within that information space. And so within that space, when you can enter into it, and we can sometimes do it when we're daydreaming or meditating, you can actually remove the part of you that's observing, and then the part of you that's just being. And then you can still observe outside of observing and see this space, this void where all these possibilities exist. And at the same time, I also think this confirms the sort of simulation theory that the reality that we're in is very dreamlike, that it fits along the lines of being in a simulation, and that your reality bubble is different than mine, and that as we're observing, it's shifting, and that each of us are moving around in these reality bubbles that are being defined by what we're observing and feeling, and by our intention, right?
Yeah, I sometimes think about this. I Am Legend, the movie, where
Love it.
he's left with the German Shepherd and himself, and everyone else is kind of gone. And then this sort of thought model where when he leaves his house, because there's not that many observers left, like co-creating this localization effect, when he's left his house, does it just become wave again? And then when he comes back, he finds it there because it's back to particulate. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. And when you really start to game plan this out and think it through, what kind of observer is not the observer? Like, if there's an ant in my office right now, it's
Exactly.
observing so we may exist within a place when there's always an observer. I think some physicists even argue the moon is an observer. When we
Mm.
talk about consciousness, everything that's conscious, even those plants, are an observer on some level. But I get what you're saying. It does feel like, does the tree fall in the forest when nobody's there? What does it make a sound? You know what I mean? Does it make a sound when nobody's there? And it does feel like that. It's like a video game. If you've ever played that video game where you go to a new part of the map and it starts to fill in as you enter into the new part of the map. And it does feel like that there may be circumstances. One thing that I'm fascinated by is the little area behind our back. Like, if I'm in this room right now, there's a little space behind my back I can't observe with my eyes, and it feels like that wave part of me is right there. Like, I can access it. Right? If you like just kind of focus on it, suddenly it starts to change. You feel a little tingling behind your back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are places and pockets throughout our day where it feels like you're in more of a wave state. And there are things that are in a wave state. And I'm constantly thinking about what's happening to the abandoned house, the room where there's nothing there. Is it just blank? And there's really no way for us to prove it, because as soon as we enter into that blank house, then it may fill in. But that's how a simulation would work, right? That's how a simulation will work. And to me, it sort of just confirms the idea that we're in a simulation dream type space. Sometimes people overreact to that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it's just a way of understanding the reality that we're in.
It's interesting because before in the quantum space, you were describing like an information field, and that was really helpful because it felt like almost it was quite a poetic metaphor because intelligence, like information, then leads to intelligence, and intelligence could kind of imply this oneness. There's this one thing in around all the information underlying it is actually intelligence, and maybe that is God, or however we want to define that. But then also with information, it comes in data and bits, and each of us are like individualized bits of data in some way.
Yeah.
You've obviously been in this space for quite some time. I'd love to hear from yourself in terms of what your thoughts are on, the unified field, unity consciousness, and also why you think we're having this individuated experience here on Earth. Why so much separation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really do feel like, and one thing I do a lot on my channel is read channelings. I'm fascinated by reading these channelings and getting a cosmic perspective. And if you meditate enough, I've had some really amazing moments where I'm not myself anymore. I'm suddenly in this sensation of total oneness with all things. And the more and more that I awaken and become enlightened, I become more and more aware that I am not an individual. I'm actually a part of the whole. And I do think that we are one entity that has chosen to individualize itself to experience and understand itself. And so, what most people are going through is an individualized experience. And because, long ago, at some point, the thought was to individualize infinitely And so if you look at nature with the Fibonacci sequence, you can constantly see that everything is individualizing infinitely, constant separation, all of it helping us to better understand ourselves, constantly, infinitely, then coming back to ourselves. And it's a big part of what's happening on this planet right now, because people that are starting to become aware of this oneness, it's not coming out directly. Like you suddenly have people that are more empathic. They seem like they're woke because they're more worried about what other people are going through. You hear that word, right? It's because they're suddenly seeing themselves in others. In the past, I remember back in the 80s, 90s, watching the news, if something would have happened on the news, then it would just been reported as the news. But now when something happens, people are directly relating to it. Like, that's so terrible. I can't believe those kids are being killed. I can't believe this war is happening over here. I can't believe that person was killed over here. And they relate to it because they see themselves in it. And when you see yourself, suddenly becomes this very passionate thing. Why are people so much more passionate now about they're going through? And it's because they're accessing this sort of oneness consciousness. But I do believe that physics shows us a basis for this comprehension. And another great place to better understand this physics of it is a book called The Secret of Light. If you've heard of that one. The idea is,
if I can't fall asleep,
okay, you know what I'm talking about.
Your recording of that is what I fall asleep to, just to let everybody in. Like, this is
the amazing revelation with this book, and it's explained scientifically perfectly, right? Is that everything is light. And even the movement of the proton and the electron, they're still the same thing. It's just that the proton and electron are moving differently. And so when when you fully comprehend that book, then the idea is that everything is the same light that's just been moving in the same way. When I awaken to that, it's truly remarkable. Everything is the same wave space. Everything is the same thing. And I think we're undergoing a constant battle of understanding separation and individualization. It's just a part of the journey that we're on. It's a super fascinating question.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering that. And yeah, Walter Russell, again, this is one of the things I was saying to you at the beginning, like these incredible teachers that have left bodies of work behind. And I never would have found them if it wasn't for your body of work, and
that makes me feel so good, man.
Oh, brother, sometimes I have this thought of, like, I just visually visualize you, like, sitting there, like, drinking a cup of tea or whatever it is, and just reading through this entire audiobook that you create and then publish to the channel. And I love your prelude, the initial thoughts that you give in terms of, like, if a Secret of Light, it's like, hey, this may not find you until you're ready, but if you have found it and it's, the timing's right for you now, just trust that, some of this is going to be quite difficult to digest in certain ways, but, just keep trusting, keep listening, and it'll bloom and blossom for you. And, like, even just those bits of permission that you give the person that's listening into it as a prelude helps so much for them. Like, it always sets the right tone for me, I find personally as well. So again, I said earlier, I'm going to struggle to not be a fanboy at certain points. But yeah.
If you love that book, then check out, I read recently The Book of Early Whisperings by Walter Russell. It's an hour-long book, and it's kind of focuses on when he was a kid. Like, every few years he would end up in the forest, and it was like he was channeling God. And it's like this experience where he's describing, like, a perfect writer of the wind and the leaves and the water rushing and how he is all of it, one with all of it. And I just suggest, if you like that book.
Oh man, I'd love to. Yeah, definitely. That's going to be tonight's homework for me. It's it's really interesting as well, following, because it seems like some of these teachers really interestingly have. It seems like they were in our past, but the information they're sharing seems quite, maybe it's because of the limited sort of bandwidth intelligence that, I don't know, I carry, but it seems like it's futuristic almost, the information that they're carrying. Do you get that? Like, do you feel that way?
When I encountered Neville Goddard and Walter Russell, this felt like new information. And I'm somebody that reads everything. And how am I not knowing about these people? I'm somebody that lives in libraries and reads everything. I'm insatiable. And how am I all of a sudden just now learning about? It's almost as if the information came in and they're telling us it's from our past, but it was just added into the timeline right now. And I get that with a number of teachers. I've had this feeling like suddenly this is being introduced to me like this is an old teacher that has 30 books, but really I would know about this. It feels like suddenly this is new and have been introduced to me. I get that.
Okay, so that brings us back to the Mandela effect in some ways. And, because there's going to be, are there in your mind limitations in terms of when we start stepping into, and I definitely want to ask questions around how we start to shift our reality. So, pardon me, everybody, we'll get there in just a moment. But the key thing in there is, like, I've got kids, yeah, and I absolutely love my kids, so I'm not trying to run away from them. But there's a question in my mind, which is like, hey, there's a reality here where Amrit has kids, and surely there's timelines where I don't think, I don't know, maybe I'm limited by my belief system, but I don't think there's a reality where I don't have kids, and maybe that's one of the precursors as to why I probably can't step into a reality where there's no kids. And again, I definitely want my kids, so touch wood. But it's interesting to sort of think about if there are multiple timelines, how karma sort of meshes its way through all of that as well. Like, does karma itself keep us somewhat localized to certain things will always be in effect across multiple timelines? Or is it actually anything goes and it's just a matter of propensity or momentum?
It's a good question. And that's a pretty, there's a lot to that. So the first question is what you mean by karma. The most simplistic definition of karma is just simply cause and effect. You know what I mean? And if you're implying karma as something that has influenced your reality from a past life, that's different than just what
Yeah,
some
that's
interpretation. So what you're saying, yeah. And so I do believe that we have an awareness of our past lives. For those that don't believe past lives, it's not important, but I do believe we have an awareness of our past lives. And from my own beliefs and channelings I've read and things that intuitive knowings that I have is that we set ourselves up for our next life based on what we've experienced in the past. And that's sort of where, to me, where the karma stops. I don't think that we are punished from our past lives. And I also, in a recent interview where somebody was talking about the shift to the new earth, is that karma has ended. In right now, in the age that we're in, as we're shifting into a new earth, or moving into 5D or fourth density, is that was sort of what we dealt with in the past. Now it's just about us awakening, and the karma has ended, meaning those things that are affecting us from past lives. But at the same time, we made choices. We wanted to. Some people choose to struggle because of something that happened in the past. We choose to grow up in India or grow up in Wyoming or somewhere because we want to experience things that will be a catalyst that will push us towards greater knowledge, understandings from our past lives. So I do think there's still that going on, that we've set ourselves up in this life. Some people choose certain kinds of suffering. I'm convinced of it because when I've coached people, I've sensed that people are wanting to have the same relationship with someone else so they can work through some issues. And I do think that we prior to our life, that we set up a sort of an agenda, have a master plan, and some of that is being affected. But I don't believe that when it comes to multiple different realities, it's an interesting intersection. As I have learned more about shifting into parallel realities, you start to formulate a relationship with your higher self. And one of the interesting aspects of this is that you sort of learn that the higher self can stop you from moving into a reality that's not going to work for you. There's a version of your higher self. There's like a higher self version of you on one level that knows everything about your life. Then there's an even higher self of the higher selves that knows about all the lives. It's sort of like a quantum higher self. And I've had experiences in meditation where I've been able to access, communicate, and interact with these versions of myself. And this version of your higher self that knows all the realities is one that's always there and constantly guiding you. And so a lot of times we don't shift. It's partially because the higher self is saying you couldn't handle this. If you woke up in a new bed, in a new city, in a new town, you're going to go insane. It's really not going to help you for the journey that you chose to be on. And so part of what I've learned to move through realities easier is to create this relationship with my higher self, and to tell my higher self, I'm okay if it's a little crazy. And to get permission, like, it's okay if I shift into this reality and it's crazy. I'm cool with that. I'm down with it. And so some people, they start freaking out when they do a quantum jump. And I've had this happen where people are like, it's just too different, it's too crazy, and it does not help them, and they're not able to deal with the major shifts and changes. So the higher self is like, just gently guiding you, like, maybe we can take you to this reality where it's a little bit different. So the higher self also is working through those karmic things, and those karmic things, those karmic patterns, are things that you want to deal with, that you're dealing with in your life now. Those karmic patterns are things that the higher self knows, because it knows you on a much more intimate scale, that you need to work through these relationship problems that you normally have. You need to work through these trust issues that you normally have. You need to work through these issues, or whatever it is. They're patterns that have been set up. And so sometimes your higher self is trying to guide you through that as well. And it's a totally interesting assemblage of multiple different things that are going on. And the one thing is that, this is much more complex, and the universe is much more crazy than we could ever imagine when it comes to it, right?
We probably can attest to that. Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother, or as the coach, or as your mentor, has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
he's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him, because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. It's interesting hearing you speak about just our current self. Then we've got a higher self, which we can relate to, and then there's like a quantum higher self, which actually serves across multiple timelines. And as you're sharing this ability to meditate into and witness across, I think certain people I've actually spoken to do have some very interesting meditation experiences themselves as well, but often discount what they experience and what they see. What do you think it is? Is it something? How come you don't write it off as imagination?
Well, I used to do that, so I understand where this is coming. We are our consciousness is hard to trust. We're in a dream space, and we have visions and images, and it's hard to trust. Now, as I've awakened, I've become more aware of the intimate connection I have with consciousness, and that everything I'm experiencing is lessons that I'm learning. So every dream I have is a communication from my higher self or God on some level. And when I'm in that meditation space, I've made it my intention to better understand what I'm experiencing, having a better understanding of what it means, working with my higher self. The great side effect of constantly trying to play around with these parallel realities is connecting to my higher self and having this resource where I can say, what is going on here? What is this? And I can get an answer. I can get I've talked about it on my channel. I'll get an answer. It's not like I always get an answer. When I sometimes I will get silence. I'm not a channeler. I've tried. I'm not an authentic channeler like some people that I've interviewed that are really good at channeling. But I do will get information. One of my favorite places, like in the shower, like I'll be like working through, and then I will have a full vision given to me in that moment, or when I'm driving my car, and I'll suddenly have a full vision given to me in that moment. And so as the more and more I'm communicating with my higher self and I'm getting information and knowledge, it helps me to understand those sort of images and what they are and how they mean. Also, great spiritual teachers have taught me this, from channeled entities that have taught it, Neville Goddard, who teaches about dreams and images and visions. And I've taken those as my mentors and I've learned from them, and I've applied their teachings as well.
Thank you so much for honoring that question. You've mentioned the term quantum jumping quite a bit in today's podcast. For those that aren't familiar with it, I think we've talked about realities. We've talked about, I think it'll be quite an easy leap now to describe quantum jumping for those that are probably hearing it for the first time. Can you describe quantum jumping and what you mean by that?
I think it's kind of funny because people overuse quantum. It's kind of hilarious. If you look at YouTube, people overuse the word quantum. And I refer to people to an episode I recently did, a beginner's guide to quantum jumping, just to understand when I'm shifting into another reality, there is a technique that you can use called quantum jumping. And, the really good author that explains this thoroughly is Cynthia Sue Larson. I would recommend. Also, there's someone named Bert Goldman.
Yeah, we've had her on the podcast.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Fascinating. Yeah.
And Bert Goldman was one who also did some work on that. And the idea is that, using our understanding of the double slit experiment and things like that, if our consciousness can enter into a quantum state and we can become aware of our consciousness in this reality, and we want to move into another reality, in most cases, when you're watching quantum particles, they don't just like move along to the other reality. There's a flash of energy, and then they end up somewhere else. And so with that awareness, I learned that if I could create this energetic sudden burst, I could suddenly move myself into another reality. There are other techniques that you can use, and sleep meditations are a little bit different, but it's an energetic shift that happens, and it's like a quantum jump. You're jumping from one reality to another. It's an instantaneous shift and then a process of integrating into that reality. A lot of other people use different definitions of it. My understanding and my definition is it's an energetic shift into another timeline. And you can control the process of quantum jumping as you get better at it and understand the technique and the way it works.
Okay, let's talk about the technique, the way it works. How do people shift from one space to the other?
Well, the primary ingredient, usually in most cases, some people can utilize other senses, is going to be their consciousness, primarily what they visualize or see in a meditation space, in conjunction with energy. And it's so interesting because Neville Goddard was teaching this without calling it quantum jumping. And he would have people imagine something, really feel into it, and then breathe, and there would be an explosion. He treated it like an orgasm, and then suddenly they were in another reality. And so the technique that and oftentimes from these techniques, the feelings that you're experiencing or the sensations of your senses are just as important. So if I'm imagining and I'm utilizing all my senses and feeling into it, and then I do qigong exercises to get my body up. I'll do exercises before I do a meditation, or there are some breathing techniques that can significantly amplify your energy. I'll do fire breath while I breathe in and out of my nose until I have this explosion, and then so I'm visualizing. I'm tuning into the frequency that I want, tuning into that timeline. I do some sort of energetic thing to get the energy up, and then I jump into that reality. I, with my conscious intention, move into that reality, and then I find myself in this new body, and then I try to integrate myself and get used to this new body that I'm in when I shift into that reality.
There's a few things in there. Firstly, there's a deep amount of trust.
There is.
And there's an interesting relationship with self in there. But the more energetic housekeeping piece, I think that I want to shed a light on for those tuning in, just for us as dotting our I's and crossing our T's. Your thoughts on jumping from this place to the next, because some people would probably be listening to this podcast kind of going, oh, I want to jump because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in this reality I want to avoid. But then I speak to certain spiritual teachers and they're like, the only way out is kind of through. How do you navigate the sort of avoidance conundrum? Is it okay to sort of be like, okay, that's not working for me, I'm meant to shift now and then shift? Or is it, hey, I need to honor this fully, and then it's like, okay, cool, now I'm ready. Did you get the nature of my question? I
kind of get it, yeah. And if it's in terms of things happening in the outside world, whatever reality you shift in is going to have those things. You're not going into any sort of utopia, all right? And so that's something that maybe people make a mistake. I want to go to this utopia, some sort of anime utopia where everything is super perfect, and it doesn't necessarily work like that. In some realities, those things affect you directly, and in some realities, they are insignificant. And in your reality bubble, as you focus and increase your vibration, your frequency, you can exist within a timeline in which everything is perfect. The colors are brighter. The smells are more intense. The food tastes better. Have you ever been driving down a street and it just seems like all these houses are beautiful and
vivid.
The cars are vivid, right? It's like this, the TV's turned up. It's much higher quality. This, and then you turn the street and it's kind of dark and that is a really powerful example of what's happening. You shift into a timeline, and then you're in this timeline, and everything's more vivid. I've had multiple times when, particularly a good example is during COVID, when I was, quantum jumping, and it seems like the whole world is going crazy around me. Everybody's complaining and there's fighting and bickering. People are quitting their jobs and losing their jobs and getting sick. But in my bubble of reality, I'm living in it is a utopia. Animals are showing up. The most amazing birds are coming into our backyard. It's beautiful. It's sunny. It's wonderful. Everything is working out perfectly. My business is working out perfectly. Everything every single day is always seemingly working out perfectly. And so why is it that it seems like the world's going crazy? I'm not escaping from that. It's still happening from that. But I am in a vibration in which those things are not important. Everybody needs those things on whatever spiritual path they're going. And some people need to experience that war. They need to experience that conflict or that whatever it is. But when I'm in that higher vibration, then those things are not affecting me, and I'm dealing with other things. Does that make sense?
It really does. You've mentioned war a couple of times in today's podcast. It begs the question in terms of, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, because you have also mentioned, it was really interesting hearing you kind of go, potentially some people have taught that the 3D is kind of, the karma for all of that is kind of maybe behind us, and we're moving into this 5D space, which I think is quite interesting. The shift that we're going through collectively is quite fascinating at this particular time. Your channel's been up and alive for a very long time. You've been doing this work for quite a significant amount of time. The shifts that you're currently witnessing, just your thoughts on where we're at currently as a collective and the shifts that you sort of perceive. And then also subsidiary to that, I know I'm asking a pretty heavy question here, but full question here. But also the shifts that we're experiencing collectively, but then also like, are we collectively choosing multiple, like, is everybody sort of reality shifting into a higher, more enlightened sort of space in your opinion?
I think in general that we're going through an amazing shift, and everybody's experiencing the shift on some level, but that there is an awakened collective, and that awakened collective, the one that's awakened, has a little bit more control and understanding of what's going on. And some people are going through lessons that they need to experience, and that includes wars, terrible traumas, conflicts, pandemics, whatever it is, right? So I think that everybody from those experiences is always, it's never linear, so everybody's not ascending in a continuous straight path, but everybody's sort of going in a spiral and continuously over time moving upwards. And all those experiences are, it's an amazing simulation that's designed to create these catalysts. The biggest thing that I'm seeing from my own perspective as having done this is there is a collective indifference. There's a sinkhole of indifference, is what Quo calls it, an entity that I've read a lot of. And it's, it's like, oh, that war's happening. So what? Doesn't affect me. I'm going to turn on my TV. And so there's a collective indifference that generally we're going on. Now, the environment we're in when we talk about a shift, as I understand it, the best way for me to understand the shift that it's experiencing, the best way that once I say, oh, okay, that's what's happening, when I explain ascension and the shift that we're experiencing, is that if we're talking about those light particles like we talked about in physics before, those light particles are all 3D light particles in general, right? And it's just like a computer. You have a computer, it has a certain speed, it has a certain amount of memory that you can do. And then slowly over time, we're entering, since about 2012, we've almost primarily started entering into an environment where the light particles are changing. And in addition to those 3D particles, there's fourth density particles. These light particles, they pack way more information in them. When we interact with these particles, we get more information. And so what is happening is, it's like imagine that you're in a bathtub and it's just drip, a little bit of water every day, drip. Over time, it's going to fill up, but it's going to be a very slow rise. And so every day, a little bit more of this light particle sort of enters into our environment. And we're accessing and interfacing this higher density light particle. So it feels like we have more awareness. Like when we're going back and thinking about our past, we weren't having these visions, we weren't having these dreams, we weren't having these awakened experiences, but we are having them more and more. And so as people experience the war in this environment, and they suddenly are accessing these higher density light particles, they have a different feeling about it. They have more empathy. It's more tragic. It's more intense. But they also have more power. And so another aspect of this shift is it's a question of power. Everybody is becoming more powerful. Not only just to create their reality, but within our own lives, more powerful in the way we interact with others, the way that we create money. And so we're making a choice as to how we use that power. And some people are choosing to only help themselves. And that's the path they're on. And that may be involved. I'm gonna put this country to war, and bad things are going to happen. And then there are others that are moved beyond that, and they are wanting to serve others. And so this shift is a constant involvement of encountering more and more light, and then experiencing these catalysts that make us question, okay, what should I do now? I have an opportunity to make money and just rip a bunch of people off, or I can just keep the course and just do this other job where I can help a bunch of people out. Or everything, if you start watching the things that happen to you, the catalyst, it's a sudden stressful encounter with your relationship, or something weird happens with your business. There's always like a sort of binary test in a lot of these situations, and it's about choosing self over the masses. And this awakening process is us going through and making our own individual choices on the soul path that we're on. And there's a collective that's awakened to this possibility, and they're a part of this process. the biggest way for us to make changes and to coexist within this shift is not necessarily go out and change anybody else. It's really to come to an awareness ourselves. And as we transform ourselves and awaken to this inner love of others and awaken to this higher calling, we do change the world around us because we're in that oneness. And so I think there's an awareness, if that makes sense. I talked about a lot of stuff in there.
No, it was really useful. And one of the things that opened itself up to me was this. I almost don't want to talk about it, so I totally should talk about it. It's almost like the double-edged sword in some ways, having additional awareness, being conscious in some ways, because when you're walking out on like, okay, now because, there are some people that are robbing and stealing, but they're not even aware that they're robbing and stealing and it's a bad thing. And, maybe you want to look at it, the karmic debt or have it like, or whatever reality they're creating. They're not even really aware that they're creating a reality, but they're in that bubble. I'm imagining, and maybe we need better languaging around it, but I'm just going to call the karmic debt that they're accruing is somewhat softer than the person that is aware.
Yes.
And then going about and doing something like that, as opposed to being aware and then trying to actually craft a reality that is actually super supportive and much more harmonious and much more awakened. And it's hard. In some ways, it makes you incumbent to make a more enlightened choice time and time again. I just couldn't help but reflect on that point in terms of the double-edged sword of awareness in some ways. I know it's a bit looking from the down upwards. Obviously, there's many blessings of being more aware, but I think I just wanted to highlight that point because
I think that it's also sometimes good to take the moral judgment out of it and just to look at in general, the way that the system and nature is set up is balance. The water always moves to level. It always moves to level. So if you do something, there's always going to be a result that's going to counterbalance it. And that is really more of what the karma that I see is just a natural offset. If you decide to be super selfish and aggressive, then you're going to see a result of that. It's going to come back, and you're going to have a result. People are going to attack you. They're going to go against you, and there's going to be a counterbalance that works against you. If you put your ego out there, you're going to have something that's going to go beyond, flash back to that. So there's always a balancing effect in reality in general, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. And now it sort of brings into question this whole concept of, I always thought a pendulum was this thing that sort of swings.
Yeah, right.
And then I started listening to a couple of your videos and talks, and you were referencing pendulums, and it didn't really make sense contextually because I didn't really understand what a pendulum was. And now I've come to understand it, but maybe you can take a moment for our audience to explain what a pendulum is, because I think it fits in the conversation at this particular point, and then we can have more of a deeper conversation.
Yeah. Now, this is a game changer in understanding how realities are shifting. And yes, there is one version of the pendulum. People use that, and it's a powerful way to tune into your intuition in some ways. This is not the same pendulum. This term pendulum was defined by Vadim Zeland in his amazing book, Reality Transurfing. I think you had Quasi on. He might have talked about it then.
Yeah, we did.
But the concept is that if I'm creating my reality and my thoughts are creating reality, well, what happens when multiple people are thinking the same thought, right? We're not doing this alone, and we're co-creating a little bit. And so what happens if multiple people are thinking the same thought, a sort of energetic structure starts to form. And at first, this energetic structure is not conscious, but it's a structure that takes energy, and it takes energy through supporting an idea or going against it. So if you and I were to sit in a room with 100 people and we're all talking about Donald Trump, then that's suddenly a Donald Trump pendulum forms, right? If you and I were talking about basketball, a basketball pendulum would then form. And then this pendulum starts to do work on its own. And so it can become so advanced and so powerful that the pendulum can start creating your reality. You're putting energy into this, and then the energy comes back to you. So, some pendulums become devastating. We've seen them in history. When a large group of people, it's like they're taken over. They become like pendulum zombies. Where like in Germany, where you have, people doing terrible things and they don't know why. It's like they lose their consciousness and they're sucked into this pendulum. The pendulum, you give your energy to that pendulum. So when people are watching the news and suddenly this thing becomes super interesting and you're watching and you're reading your news and you're giving your energy to it. And this entity takes the energy. And so the revelation is that you need to be moderating and watching how you're using your energy, because these pendulums can influence your thoughts and your energy. And if you're not giving your energy to the pendulum, and you're not allowing the pendulum to influence your thoughts, you have this amazing energy to create your own reality. And so what happens is these pendulums can actually influence the way you think because they want your energy. And so, anybody that's worked for a corporation has seen this. The corporation just ends up being an energetic that you're supporting it. You want it to be successful. You want to move up the ranks of that corporation, and it becomes its own pendulum. And so the truth of it is we are constantly interacting with pendulums all the time. Politics is the worst place for it. Governments and politics is the worst place, but it doesn't matter. Even a family can be a pendulum. A pendulum can be created with just two people. So you have to learn how you cannot live in a world without pendulums. It's like saying you have to live in a world without water or oxygen. You have to interact with these pendulums. And so the people that started transurfing became super overly paranoid and ended up just staying at home, like they could never follow the news, and then couldn't watch any TV because it's a pendulum, right? You have to be able to monitor how these pendulums affect you and how you give energy to these pendulums. These pendulums eventually become conscious, and they're like living entities. They are referred back in magical text to as egregores, and they have power. They can literally have power. People, can utilize them, and they could influence. I've even met people. I have a friend who's a comedian, and he totally loves to be in the crowd, and it's like he's a pendulum vampire a little bit. Like he likes to take the energy of the crowd. It reduces him up when he gets them to laugh. It's like, he becomes that focal point that for the energy that's coming in. Some people they end up learning how to work on these energies, but it's complicated. It's complicated. It's not as simple. I can give you a simple way of dealing with it. It's just an aspect of reality creation that must be acknowledged and understood if you're wanting to influence and change your own reality.
Yeah, and I think we had Dr. John Churchill on the podcast, and he marries some deep Western psychology with deep Eastern Tibetan spirituality. And he's got the fourth turning of the Dharma is his body of work. And it's really interesting because I never really thought about, well, we're going to call it sigil magic this particular, because you use the word magic, but sigil magic in some ways. But then also because he talks about how like the medicine Buddha is an example that he gave in the podcast I had with him.
Yeah.
They drew him up, they gave him certain properties, and someone like felt into the ether and felt that there was a space or a frequency available, touchwood, and then they all started collectively meditating on the boons and the benefits of this medicine Buddha. And so people have been doing that for eons, and this structure in the ether actually starts to coalesce and form. So pendulums aren't just a negative thing. There are also positive pendulum.
Yeah.
And then you think about, like, I don't want to call it like this, but touchwood, think generations have been praying to the medicine Buddha, and some people are actually scraping healing off the ceiling, and like calling it in and just kind of being like, yep. And it's actually having a positive healing impact on them.
Yeah.
And it's quite profound when you start to tune into this concept of pendulums. It's interesting for me to have this conversation because, and my background as a Sikh, we're sort of taught to just sort of like, yes, acknowledging what you're saying is to sort of go, yep, these things exist. But at the same time, it's like, learn to find your center within yourself rather than, external forces, you never know the intentions behind them, positive or negative, really. So if you can, trying to localize yourself within yourself is probably the safest place to be in many ways.
Yeah, like what you say is so true. I think that why some magic spells are so powerful when you hear people using certain mantras, because they're tapping in to all those other people. When we become one being and we access the collective consciousness of all things, then when we do that, when we recite that old famous mantra, we're entering into the energy of all the people that have ever done it. And so when you say the Lord's Prayer, you're sort of entering into the energy of that Lord's Prayer, all those people that have ever done it. It has nothing to do with the words itself. It's the energy of it. And, to go back to what you said, I'm a huge believer in the sigil and the power of sigil magic. If you follow my channel, I'm also an artist, and I'm a big believer that all art is a sigil. And you can infuse energy into your artwork so that it becomes a sigil. I think that movies we watch are like sort of hyper sigils, like a moving sigil, and then sort of everything that we're interacting with all the time is a sigil, and that sigil magic is super powerful. And it's just like anchoring with neurolinguistic programming. Words are sigils, but I'm a big believer that that people who are really advanced in using reality creation and energetics understand the power of the sigil, because there's a collective. And one thing that's happening with the shift is that we're becoming aware of everyone else's thoughts, feelings, memories. We're shifting into the Akashic. The Akashic's becoming alive. That's part of what's happening when we shift. And so that we enter into the energy of all those sigils. The sigils become more and more powerful as the shift grows, right?
Yeah, it's deeply fascinating. And I guess even with the referencing, so we've got these pendulums, we've got like all these different, and we've also got other people's thoughts. And like you said, we're waking up to them, we're shifting more to the Akashic. There's a question around, is it ethics? I don't know. Like when we're going through shifts, do we need to be considering our families, our commitments, our community, humanity at large as we're going through these shifts? Or is it all like it's all fine, like just continue to do the best you can do for yourself?
The secret to everything that you've asked is just love. When you're moving into the shift and coming into a greater understanding, the whole simulation and all the realities are just based around lessons around love. And so when we tune into the intelligence of love, love knows the answer to everything that you're saying. It will always guide us to the place where we are helping out our friends, family, our communities. Love is intelligent and powerful. The first step is us understanding our power, and then we understand the nature of love. Who do I love, myself or love others? And then we once we start to tune into this love, finding the love in each moment, awakening the love within us. The love itself is intelligent, and the love will guide us and always will have the right thing for us to do in terms of the other people in our lives, our family, our friends, our community, our world. And we can embody those things that will help the world out when we tune into love. Because I don't have the answer. If I'm awakened, but I do know that love has the answer. And love being more than just romantic love, this energy, this powerful energy that is within us, and that's the major revelation here is the nature of love.
Yeah, I love that you're sharing. Oh, sorry, that was ironic. I love that you're sharing about love. Because one of my questions is going to be, in your experience, what are like some of the typical speed bumps that inhibit people from like that, or that keep people trapped in undesired realities? Like, I imagine guilt, unworthiness, impatience are probably some of those things.
All of those things are important. But right now in our environment, we are in an age of misinformation in which people are actively utilizing this understanding of reality creation against us. And, people have become very adept
Sorry, the gravitas of what you just said hit me. Like the awareness of reality. Sorry, I'm interrupting, but reality
please,
creation,
fine.
people being aware of it, and then knowing that we're programmable, then
we
that
are
being harnessed.
programmable. As somebody that has studied hypnosis, I have a number of friends that I have met that are good friends of mine that have actually worked in psyops with the government, you know what I mean, in other countries as a part of psychological warfare, and really getting to understand the way that following politics and the way that people can be manipulated and misinformation can be created, and that realities are being created without our knowledge. There's so many people that are unconscious, and that unconsciousness, they're being manipulated. And so that's the thing that I see. And I don't, I went through a phase where I thought I can teach people about this. I'm going to teach you, hey, this is how you're being. It doesn't work. It's and so I do think there's a level of consciousness where you're able to overcome that, and we'll see how it goes. You know what I mean? It's just an interesting perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because back to before that question, you were referencing love, and I think when people hear things like psyops, immediately they start to step into fear.
It's a fear-based thing, yeah. And
the
that's
irony,
love is the solution to that.
And that's the interesting bit, right? Because immediately it's like, there's these things happening, and it's like naturally the body wants to recoil and sort of, the mind wants to recoil and step into this fear. But actually, back to pendulums, it's the fear that actually feeds it. And it's this really like, oh, crap. Like the thing I've got to do is somehow love it for what it is, and that's what dissolves it. It's so trippy for the mind to actually grip that reality, right?
It is. I think we spend our whole lives trying to learn this dichotomy between love and fear, and it's going to become more and more intense as the nature of the multiverse becomes available to us, and as we continue to shift and learn these lessons. It's not complicated. It really is just questions of choosing love or fear, and there's lots to be fearful of. I get it, but if you enter into your own power and choose to be a creator and tune in to the intelligence of love, you can make the world a better place through you just being who you are. No doubt about it.
Brian, my granddad had a journal, and I came across it, and it was really interesting. He is writing away, and my granddad was a really interesting cat. He I think it was like 6 or 7 different languages he had under his belt in a time where we didn't really have Duolingo or anything like that. Yeah. And he would get like newspapers from like all these different languages delivered daily in his little village in India of all the random places. And I picked up this journal, and it was interesting because, yes, he's writing to himself, but then there's like cutouts from the newspaper, or there's cutouts from a magazine. Mm-hmm. And he's not just like reflecting on what this says. He's reflecting. The metacognition was, it's interesting that I came across this piece of information today based on where I'm at in my life. And then he would go into like psychoanalyzing his journey based on that synchronicity. He didn't call it synchronicity, but he would use the synchronicity and the piece of information as being like a sign, basically. And I find that romance that he had with life and the information bits that were coming through to him quite poetic. And it inspires me a great deal to feel into that. Even when before there was languaging around synchronicity and signs, human beings were walking around connected into that space already. We just now have different terms for it. But that to say, you also mentioned just previously the amount of misinformation. Like the time we live in right now, there's a period where knowledge was power, but now we live in a point where, the discernment of knowledge is power, right? And that's quite the seismic shift. And yeah, it's just a very interesting time to be navigating so much. And I guess for me, this question is really stemmed from, yeah, just having your content online as a bit of a source where I can tap into to sort of, consistently just, oh, yep, like, if there is a fear-based thing coming up, it's like, cool, tune into this, tune into that. And, because at the end of the day, like we've been discussing, there is an opportunity for us to create our own pendulums in some way if you want to, and tuning into like the secret of light, like I said earlier in the podcast, something I tune into every night. If I can't fall asleep, I'm listening to that. And I think it's had like, I don't know, maybe it's had 1 million views, maybe not that many just yet, but like I'm sure maybe 500,000 of those are mine. Yeah. But you know what I mean? It's because in many of your videos, there's this awareness that you share as well, which is, the fact that you've come across this now probably is the timing is right. And I feel like you're somebody that really walks this path of synchronicity, signs, divine timing quite deeply in your path. And I saw that in my granddad's journal as well. And it's just really profound. I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that awareness that you're carrying in that space.
It's really interesting, as you may know, being, just somebody on YouTube that's putting out an episode every day, how often somebody will say, I needed this right now at this time. Like, how would I have known when I made this a month ago and I just released it now? But literally almost every episode, I have somebody contact me or making a comment that this is total synchronicity with me, Brian, that this episode was literally made for me and you're speaking directly to me. And so I find that interesting. And I find it also, in my own case, it's fascinating if we were to look back 5 years ago and what we were finding fascinating and what we find fascinating today, the way that we've evolved spiritually just from the knowledge that we have, the books that we've read, and some stuff we just take for granted now. And like 5 years ago, it was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. And then now it's just like, yeah. I heard it last Thursday, So it's interesting. The mind and consciousness are designed to sort of bring stuff to us when we look for it. And so for those that are on that spiritual path, they have this wonderful treat constantly being given new knowledge, new information that's brought to us, that's placed in front of us in our consciousness. And it's exciting. It's so exciting the way that happens. One of my favorite things just to go on archive.org and just randomly start searching for just a single topic and then watch it lead for this leads to that, this leads to that. Suddenly have this book that I want to read for the channel or a chapter that what I mean? The way that that we're brought to stuff, and then suddenly I'm reading that for my channel, and then somebody's telling me, how did you know to read that? Because it's this saved my life, or this totally changed my life when I read it. And there's a certain excitement that everybody can experience on their path when they start to really seek out knowledge and information. It's fascinating. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I love the grace with which you share it as well. It's these little things like, and just to give, and some of them I imagine, like even completely life-changing as you're describing, but some of them are even just these little 1% tweaks which actually, as you leave the airport, like land you at a completely different destination on the other side. Like, where the wish fulfilled was something I never would have come across had I not come across your channel, right? Never got out the wish fulfilled. Like, super helpful. Isn't it wonderful? Just something as simple as, isn't it wonderful? You know, like just the phrase and just sitting with like, isn't it wonderful? And like, it just immediately your frequency shifts. Like the minute I just go, and now like, you know, all the meditations, and I was like, oh, isn't it wonderful that I get to live in this house? You know, instead of, you know, like, you know, there's always the desire for more, you know, for people. And it's like, isn't it wonderful I get to live in this house? And actually like the hack being, when you're happier with what you've got, you call in more of what you've got, you know, like, isn't it wonderful?
Yeah.
And pieces like imagination as God, we talked a little bit earlier, like how did you trust, you know, your meditations and stuff, and recognizing that actually, like you said, like imagination is, you know, and those are just the Neville Goddard pieces. You've got Edgar Casey and like the Akashic Records, the Children of the Law of One was super like interesting stuff. And man, and then Walter Russell, I can't even begin to talk to you about like Walter Russell. There's already some more reading material. I've got to get going. Can I ask you about Joseph Murphy? I haven't come across him, and I was checking out your channel in preparation for today's episode. Who's Joseph Murphy?
Oh my gosh. Well, you're I'm excited that you're now just being introduced to Joseph Murphy. Joseph Murphy And Neville Goddard had sort of the same mentor, Abdullah.
Who's Abdullah?
Abdullah was somebody that taught Neville Goddard, and he was this Ethiopian that lived in New York that taught Neville Goddard all of the things that a lot of the stuff that he's saying. He taught that interpretation of the Bible where every part of the Bible is you. All the characters are in the Bible are you, you know, the way that Neville talked about it. So when you read Joseph Murphy, you're getting the same perspective as Neville Goddard. I probably enjoyed Joseph Murphy more than Neville Goddard. He was an amazing teacher. He's known for his book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. So the difference between Neville and Joseph Murphy probably wrote about 30 more books. But when Joseph Murphy is talking about the subconscious mind, it's the same as Neville Goddard talking about imagination. Is really the only real difference, but the teachings are essentially the same. Joseph Murphy had a very hopeful way of teaching and taking like ridiculous teachings from the Bible and making it all make sense. And it was very personable. And I'm just a big fan of Joseph Murphy. He's as good. They're equivalent. They're coming from the same space. When I'm teaching Joseph Murphy, I'm teaching Neville Goddard. They're basically the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. And how, when you're coming across these great teachers, different twists, different perspectives, obviously they're all informing you. How do you come across new teachers, new inspirations on your path? One thread just leads to the next sort of thing, or yeah?
I mean, a lot of times I had already read a lot of these authors, and I'm introducing them from the past, but new ones, they'll come to me in a million different ways. Somebody will send me a recommendation. I'll be reading through a book and I'll look up. I'm somebody that likes to, when I'm reading through a book and they make a reference, and I want to go and look up that reference, and then I'll see it, and then I'll read it, and then I'll look up all the other connections that person has. And when I really like an author, I will read all that author has written.
Yeah.
Once I hit one that's great, then I'm going to read everything that author's
all of
written.
the iceberg needs to be.
It needs to all be written. I'm very grateful that I learned speed reading in college, something that has helped me throughout my life, and I'm able to read super quickly. And also I love to listen to audiobooks super quickly, so I can go through a lot of information quickly. So I have a list of like probably 100 authors I haven't even talked about on the channel that I really do need to talk about on the channel. And it's never ending. I'm constantly being given there's new books and new concepts, new things coming out. It's pretty cool.
Super relieving to hear you actually say that, because I feel like there's an infinite number of people left to interview, and I look at your body of work and I'm like enamored by it, and then kind of going, oh, okay, Brian feels the same way. There's plenty more content yet left to be shared.
It's never ending.
Yeah. Well, I think that leads us to a question in terms of, you're doing a lot of inspiring work for someone like myself at the very least, but I think there's so many others and so many others and so many others. I can comfortably say that. What is your mission? What is your passion? What is your inspiration? What is your hope for what you're leaving with this work? Yeah.
I just want people to have the tools to choose the reality that they want, and no matter where you're at, there's somebody that's watching this right now that's struggling. Maybe they're broke, maybe their heart is broken, and I just want you to know that it's going to be okay, and that I've been through it, and that if you follow these simple techniques that are available to you, that you can literally have or do anything that you want. And for me to experience this, going from the worst situation to be able to transform my life, and then through coaching people and watching them transform their lives, it's exciting. And so that, that my mission is for people to definitely activate this and be able to change their lives, and that no matter what you're going through, you can change it.
Brian, brother. Thank you so much for sharing yourself so abundantly.
I want to mention my new book.
Yeah, please. I was going to just ask for those that want to tune in more.
Activate Your Unlimited Power is a new book that I just published.
There's also The Reality Revolution, which is the book, which when you read the reviews on the book as well, people are like, oh, holy goodness, like the amount of information in that book. So I'm sure this is, can tell us a little bit about Activate Your Potential,
I just wanted to create a book that, like, imagine a book that if you read the book, it changed your consciousness. It's not about that, like, it's not like just your casual reading experience, that when you read the book, the words and the patterns of words used will change your consciousness. And so my goal was, could I create a book that could dissolve all those blocks that people have to accessing their power? So I used neurolinguistic programming, different certain sort of patterns, so that when you'll find yourself removing the obstacles, the delusions, the distortions that you commonly have, so that you'll, by the time you're done with the book, you're fully accessing your power, and you can do whatever you want with it. So that was the goal with that book. So
epic, man. I absolutely love your body of work. I'll put a link to both books in the description below, and obviously your YouTube channel. And actually, some of my favorites from your channel, actually, I'll pick them out and put them into the description below for people to go check out. Just some of the things that are inspiring me on my evolution as well, if that calls them. And
keep doing what you're doing. Your channel's great, and I love it. And you're interviewing some amazing people, and so keep doing what you're doing, brother.
Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you for today, sharing yourself so abundantly here with us. And also, man, like, I'd be remiss, man. Thank you so much for your life's work, everything. And glad you stepped into a reality where the bullet didn't take you down. Glad you're here.
I'm glad to share this reality with you, brother.
I get to receive all the benefits of all the work that you're sharing online. Thank you so much for you, brother, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Alrighty, Inspired Soul, you've made it through to the end of another Inspired Evolution podcast. Thank you so much for your inspiration to evolve. I'm so inspired by your persistence, your diligence, your dedication to your inner work to evolve. On screen right now is an opportunity for you to continue your inspirations and to keep the evolution flowing. There are a couple of episodes on screen which are two personal favorites of mine. As always, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps so much more than we can say. This entire channel is powered by your subscription. And I'll see you in the next one.